I do this every single day. And what I've become much more observing of over especially the last few months are my emotions and what I do with my emotions. How do I treat my emotions? Do I suppress them so that they get stuck again? And although they want to come out, they never really have the option or the opportunity to get fully digested and transmuted? Or do I use a tool that actually helps me do that? Oftentimes we realize, for example, right, I had this deep sitting sadness in myself. And I didn't even know where it was coming from. And most of the time, we actually do not know where it's coming from because we pick up so much stuff from our environment, from other people around us, the people we grow up with. And then, of course, we have our own experiences, and we're not always allowed to express our emotions as toddlers or as younger children. So those emotions get stuck inside of our bodies and they stay there. And then they want to remind us constantly that they actually want to be dissolved. They want to have the right to come out.
I really do love your artwork. You love art? Is that something you collect?
I don't collect art, although I do love art, but I don't collect art also because I move far too much. I've lost some pieces and I don't want to lose other pieces, any other pieces.
Fair. I I totally understand that.
Yeah, I love to dance though. I love to dance. And I'm
Wait, what
actually
kind
preparing for a dance show this Sunday with
Oh,
people.
that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
What kind of dance is it?
Well, at this point, the show is with one group, we do Sabar dancing, so the Senegalese dance, and the other one is an Afrofusion. It's more like modern,
That
modern
is
fusion. Yeah.
so fun. How
But
long have you been dancing?
I love Dombolo. Dombolo is Congolese, in case you didn't know. And yeah, so these are some of my loves.
Well, that was great. Do you have any clips of yourself dancing online?
I do actually. You know what? For the fun of it, put up a YouTube playlist where there's different dances. Not all the dances I've ever done, but just a few snippets. I don't have videos about everything, but
Sure.
yeah.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. That's really great. I just love that you're artistic and you have an enjoyment of the arts. That's so wonderful. I feel like it's helpful as leaders that we pursue our passions too, and we're not strictly talking about leadership or 100% of the time. We have to have that holistic approach. It's funny you mentioned art and moving because my family come from a family of artists, and it made me think about my uncle and my grandmother, who she recently passed away, but they both had, like, a room full of their art, and it took up so much space in the house. It's wonderful, but at the same time, it is a lot to carry with you. It's definitely at least with dance, that is you. You get to carry yourself through that, and so that's wonderful that you can pursue that.
Yeah, that's a bit more practical in that sense. At some point, I left 35 boxes of books. So literature, also a form of art, right? In Brazil. And that was pretty darn painful. Huge detachment exercise for me. So yeah.
What's been in your experience, what's been the best book that you've ever read? Is there a book that was in that pile that you wish you'd held on to?
Look, I wouldn't say the best book I did read at the time a lot of fiction as well as in addition to nonfiction. And I learned a bunch about cultures, different cultures. Like, for example, I've never been to India. However, I learned about the Indian culture through books and through historic novels and things like that. I learned a lot about Latin America through all the different amazing authors, writers there. And then I've traveled extensively through Latin America. I also lived in Latin America 9 years. But I just really learned a lot in addition to what I could ever have experienced in what we call real life. So that is definitely extremely enriching. And the beauty of it has also been that a lot of it I've been able to read in original, like, because I speak Spanish, Portuguese, English, German, of course, my native language, and French. So I was able to enjoy the originals, which is always, to me, it's always an advantage.
That's wonderful. That is a great advantage. I wish that I had that skill set to be able to speak so many languages. That's a wonderful skill set to have and so cool. I think you're absolutely right. I love reading too. And I love reading different kinds of books because I think to your point, they help us understand different cultures and mindsets and backgrounds a lot better. And we can relate to people a lot better. I feel like for leaders, it's really important that we understand different perspectives. And when you read a book, you're opening yourself up to a new world, to your point, that we might not get to actually experience physically in person. So we have that portal into another world and element that I think is really crucial. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a great way to start our conversation too, Regina, because I'd love to understand your background and what has brought you to where you're at now in your world.
Yes, I actually also wrote a book about it, at least some pieces last year, and it's called Living My Freaking Amazing Life. It also includes leadership lessons that I have learned along the way, both leadership of self and leadership of others, because as we both know, and our listeners probably know as well, self leadership is the foundation of any effective leadership. So I wanted to include those to make the book even more valuable to my readers. It is a combination, Rebecca, of an inspirational book to really meant to inspire you to live life on your terms, to live your dreams, and to choose the life that's right for you. That might look completely different to mine, of course. It's really just meant as an inspiration, not something to necessarily copy. I've lived a bunch of really awesome adventures, and some of them were related to huge risks. And I'm not saying you have to take the same risks, not at all. It's your life. You do with that inspiration what you want to do with it. And in addition, I wanted to also share those leadership lessons. So, and, why did I write this book, Rebecca? It's because I got so many requests actually from friends. They said, well, Regina, when are you going to finally write this book? It was such an enriching experience for myself to really choose the relevant adventures, experiences on 5 continents that I've lived and worked and traveled on and share them with people in this way. But for the longest time, I didn't know what to focus it on. And so last year, I finally figured that out. It had to be on leadership.
That's great. That's so wonderful. And I love that you came with that sort of qualifying understanding statement that it's your life and you're not encouraging people to follow and copy paste your life over to theirs. And often I feel like we get bombarded with a lot of content on social media, how you can follow somebody's framework for how they built their business and how they made decisions and how they live their life, and you can have the same life too. And I love how that you're pointing out that we're all going to live our own lives, and yet we can take some tools and mindset understanding. We could use frameworks to build the life that we are after, not necessarily somebody else's life. So I like that you qualified that for us so that we're not simply following a framework to get to the same outcome, that even though your life is very enriched and fulfilled, it might not be the same kind of fulfilling life for somebody else, and so we have to approach it from that point of view. Do you disagree? Is that kind of summarizing your mindset?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You are 100% right. Also, it's a book that can show you that not everything is always going upwards in people's lives, right?
Mm.
Even if it looks like it on social media, you just mentioned social media. We all go through those ups and downs, through situations that are quite challenging. And of course, now I know that I somehow created all those situations myself for some reason, even though maybe not always consciously. But here's another intention that I had with this book. It's really to also realize that there is a point in our lives where we can start doing it more consciously, right?
Mm.
And this happens through awareness. And leadership is a lot about awareness. It's about awareness of who we are ourselves, and it's about the awareness of who other people are, the ones that we want to bring along with us, that we want to inspire, that we want to manage, lead in some way. I think the more awareness we gain, the more we can be conscious in our actions.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's a recurring element, that awareness, self-awareness, that comes up quite often, and everybody has a slightly different approach to it. I was talking with another guest about how it can be an understanding of reflection and that you really can't separate the two. I'm curious what your take is on awareness. Is there a way that you tap into that awareness, or is it now so, I don't wanna say common, but natural maybe for you to get into that mindset that you're not even really thinking about the thinking of yourself? How do you tap into that awareness?
It's never done. I do this every single day. And what I've become much more observing of over especially the last few months are my emotions and what I do with my emotions. How do I treat my emotions? Do I suppress them so that they get stuck again? And although they want to come out, they never really have the option or the opportunity to get fully digested and transmuted, or do I use a tool that actually helps me do that? Oftentimes we realize, for example, right, I had this deep sitting sadness in myself. And I didn't even know where it was coming from. And most of the time, we actually do not know where it's coming from because we pick up so much stuff from our environment, from other people around us, the people we grow up with. And then, of course, we have our own experiences, and we're not always allowed to express our emotions as toddlers or as younger children. So those emotions get stuck inside of our bodies and they stay there. And then they want to remind us constantly that they actually want to be dissolved. They want to have the right to come out. And ideally, of course, we don't want let's just take anger, for example, right, Rebecca? Ideally, we don't want to do this in an outburst like a pressure cooker. And that's also not how we actually transmute them. So it's really useful to find a tool that allows us to do that. And that's what I have been working on and using for myself much more proactively in these last few years and months.
That's great. And you said a tool, so is that your framework, the Powerful Leadership Transformation, or is that another tool that you developed?
No. So the powerful leadership transformation is one of my frameworks for leadership, and it is indeed a lot about self-leadership, this particular one. Then I have my new paradigm leadership, which is very much about the team. But
Mm,
powerful leadership transformation, yes, it is a lot about yourself, your self-leadership. And then, of course, you can pass it on to your team, and it's very desirable that you do that as a leader. Now, you will also pass it on in the shape of who you show up as a result of going through the powerful leadership transformation. That's why it's called transformation, right? The tools I was referring to now, though, are tools, for example, and some people might be familiar with those methods, like the Sedona method, like level 5, like, they're different methods and different people have different preferences. So I have a few of those in my toolbox, so I can just pull them out depending on the clients I'm working with. Because as you said earlier, we need those holistic approaches. Life is a holistic phenomenon. We're not just a leader. We are a leader, maybe in our office role or in our business, but we are not a leader in every single circumstance that we live. And we also have this life is really holistic, a holistic phenomenon. It's not split up into different portions or areas, although we talk about areas of our lives. That's just an artificial compartmentalization, or what a word, right? Compartmentalization. And it's not really how it works. So, yeah, so these are some tools that I use personally. And then, yes, powerful leadership transformation integrates a lot of that knowledge indirectly and sometimes more directly. For example, one of its pillars is a self-empowering mindset and heartset, because I also believe that you cannot really just talk about the mindset without talking about the rest. I mean, you can, but then is it going to be so effective? Maybe not.
Yeah. What does that mean for you when you talk about heart and mind? How are they I don't want to assume. I imagine we all have an idea of how they're connected, but how do you connect them in your approach to leadership specifically?
Yeah. So, first of all, when we talk about also emotions, for example, like fear is in our minds. It's never in our hearts. In our hearts is where we can find courage. And sometimes we need that courage, especially as leaders. And that's just one of the many, many treasures we can find in our hearts. We also say, make that decision with your heart. And we say that for a reason, Rebecca, because our heart knows what's the right decision for us. It might not be the right decision for your friend or for someone else in your family or your colleague, but it's the right decision for us. And as a leader, I believe we want to have both, right? So we have the logical piece and the intellectual piece, and then we want to have the intuitive piece as well. I believe that intuition is very much underrated in leadership and in business. It's a very precious gift that we want to honor so that we can use both in equilibrium and balance, right? And then really pull from whatever is most needed in a specific moment. So, the heart and the mind, they just go better together.
I agree. When it comes to intuition, it could be challenging for folks who maybe aren't practiced in listening to what their intuition is saying, or even maybe recognizing that it is intuition. So, how do you know that you're following a trusted intuition versus maybe battling over something in your mind that you need to do a little bit more insight gathering or reflection on?
Yeah. So it's a matter of practice. The more you trust yourself to connect with your heart, to really listen to your intuition is your truth. It's your true voice. It's always there for you. Oftentimes we ignore it, we disregard it because we are not practiced in using it because it's been undervalued our entire life. So we are very much trained from school on and sometimes younger to listen to our analytical thinking, right? To pay attention to our analytical thinking. And oftentimes we think we're dealing with facts, but they are not really facts. They turn out to be not facts at all after a while. And, it's not easy really to find factual facts. They're not always facts. Not always everything that seems like a fact is a fact, right? So I believe that, again, you want to have a balance. Yes, due diligence and data have value. However, your intuition does as well. So if you use that intellectual power in your mind and that you specific wisdom that makes you unique as a leader, it's you specific wisdom that you store in your heart, then no one else has that. That's when you bring unique value because you have gathered this wisdom through your own unique experiences. For example, in my case, while I've lived in several different cultures and several different continents, well, I have gained wisdom that is different to someone else's wisdom. It's not
Mm,
better or worse. It's just different. And I want to really show that as a leader because then people can decide whether I'm the right person for a specific role or whether they want to follow me. It's always a weird word, but for something that I might be able to share with them. Right.
yeah. Regina, it makes me think, well, intuition and practice, that practice implies that there's time spent and it compounds and you develop a greater either practice or experience or performance of using something or the other. Similar to as a dancer, I'm sure you practice and you make progress. It doesn't happen all at night overnight all at once. Maybe it does for some people. I don't want to assume there either, but I guess the point I'm getting to that you're making me realize is that our intuition comes from the lived experiences compounding and learning that we can identify when we are making a decision what our past experience has shown us. Maybe we can see a green flag or a red flag and it can help us identify a similar situation And at the same time, you talk about balance, and we probably have to stay open to new opportunities as well, because maybe a situation presenting itself seems like something we've experienced, but it could be wholly and entirely new. So, how do you strike a balance between following intuition and still being open to explore new things and try new things, or just learning more about the people that you're leading?
Well, intuition oftentimes is actually about opening up new possibilities
Mm.
that you might not even think of if you stay on a purely logical level. If you dare to step outside of your habitual thinking, that's when new possibilities show up because they have always been there. You just hadn't seen them. There's always unlimited possibilities.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. So we might actually be operating automatically, habitually. I like that word, habitual. We might habitually be practicing or making decisions, but we're not really in tune with why we're making those decisions. And if we perhaps pause and listen to the moment and ourselves, and getting back to the emotions that you were talking about in that self-awareness, is that going to take us a step further towards understanding intuitively what we need to do?
Right. And it doesn't have to take longer than the other way. If you want to gather data, that takes time too. And again, I'm not replacing data gathering. I'm not replacing the logical thinking. What I'm talking about is to really use both as a leader. Because after all, our heart, we could even say it's a part of our brain because it has like 40,000 brain like cells. They're called neurites and they have a very important function. It also has a magnetic field that is up to 5,000 times stronger than the head brain. So yes, we do connect with the world around us and with the people around us through that magnetic field, through our heart. Of course, now we could go spiritual and say we're already all connected. That's also true. But sometimes we need to find a way of describing things, and one truth doesn't exclude the other.
It's a refreshing way of approaching leadership too, when you were talking about books earlier, and we are often given the sort of logical, practical, well, I think there's practicality in everything that you're sharing too, but we're given the frameworks and the science or the data and the steps. And to your point, we don't want to miss out on the moment that we're in with other people and what's really connecting all of us. So when you're working with clients or teams, individuals or teams, how do you help them change their approach? And I'm sure that change is tough for a lot of folks. So do you have steps or any sort of practical tips and advice that you can give us if we're trying to understand better? How do we connect our mind and our heart
Yeah.
to get to that intuitive thinking?
Yeah, first of all, we hear people talk about authenticity a lot, right? And what is that really authenticity? So usually we say, well, if somebody shows up authentically, we know what they're about, so we can decide whether we want to trust them, right? And then if this is what they say and what they do is aligned with our values and with what we like, with our preferences, then we will trust them. So it's really about the alignment of thoughts, words, attitude, behavior, actions, values, body language, of course, and the energy you show up with. So that's definitely something you want to focus on, that alignment and that true authenticity. And it also comes through your energy. So that's also something that I work with my clients on a lot, the optimization of that energy, because then that also makes it easier to be seen as a leader and to be heard in a meeting, for example, right? So I just really mentioning this quickly because it's an important element that we often forget about. Now, trust is a big thing for leaders. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So everything is about trust. And if you want your team to trust your decisions, then I would say start by being transparent about your intentions, not just your actions, right? When people understand the why behind what you do, and when they really gain clarity about your intention, that it builds clarity for them, and it builds trust and also automatic alignment. And you know what it also does, and that's a bonus of building trust in this way, it takes the pressure off you to pretend that you have all the answers, because you gain in this way the right to be honest about your motives, and you are also creating a culture where others feel safe to do the same, and where not everybody feels like they have to have always have to have the perfect solution, where they are also encouraged and invited to experiment with new possibilities, and therefore they will be automatically more creative.
I feel like that's a really valuable nugget that we can all take away, whether we're leading a team or we're leading ourselves. It's really important that we have that alignment, thoughts, words, actions, the energy that we're bringing to a situation. I'm sure there are times when we're saying one thing and then maybe our actions have to shift. And what we said is no longer in line with what we now feel we need to do down. So, how do you help a leader who is feeling pulled in different directions and maybe they need to change and amend what they've said?
Well, again, it's about being transparent that the situation or your opinion maybe even has changed, and to be able to admit this. It's no disaster. Communication is key, and how you communicate as a leader, right? I prefer, if I'm in your team and that happens, I prefer to be informed. I prefer to be in the picture, and I would love to also know the why. So if you explain it to me, I have no problem with that.
I love that you touch on the why too, because I feel like people was talking to another guest about when it comes to self awareness, you don't always have to dive deeper into why you're necessarily feeling a certain way, but what are you feeling first? And yet, as humans, we're naturally curious. From my experience, everybody has some kind of curiosity in them. And so, for your team, they're going to be curious, they're going to need to know, and that why can be a great motivator for all of us. When we have an understanding of the why behind something, then we're able to make better decisions, or we're able to, I know you use the word follow it. I don't necessarily like follow the leader either,
Yeah.
but align with the leader and align with the work or the project or the path that we have to travel down and work towards. So I'm glad you brought that up. I know you have a wealth of additional information to share and coaching and experience that you're taking to your clients. So, how do you like people to get in touch with you and to reach out if they want to work with you, Regina, and use all of that to better themselves and their team?
Yeah, so my website is transformyourperformance.com. There's a page dedicated to my frameworks. I didn't want to really bore everybody with all the details of the frameworks, but they are truly helpful as a foundation for my coaching approach and for some trainings that I also do. So there's a page there as well. Everything is really on my website. A link to my Rise to Lead podcast included, my YouTube channel. So there's a lot of information there.
That's great, Regina. You'll never bore with frameworks. I think there's a time and a place for them, but I'm glad that we had a really enriching conversation today. Good luck on the dance performance this weekend.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna check out those clips and we'll definitely encourage everyone listening. Please go check out Regina's website and learn and glean from her wisdom and get in touch if you're interested in working with her. And thank you to our wonderful audience for listening and tuning in to another episode of Bad Bosses, Great Leaders podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Regina.